Welcome to a new video with me. I'm Jaya from Hobbii. And if you're new to crocheting, you're going to want to stick around for this video because today we're going to learn how to read a crochet pattern. So I'm going to be completely honest with you. The first time I read a crochet pattern, I was pretty frustrated and angry because it was just a complete new language. I did not understand anything. Then the second time I tried, my project wasn't looking like I was expecting it to. So that got me insecure, got me a little bit, am I doing the right thing? Yes or no? So I thought I failed. But you know what? Learning things takes its time, and it takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of patience, especially. So luckily, there are ways of making this process a little bit more enjoyable and easy and quick process. Yes! So keep on watching if you want to, learn how to read a pattern the right way. As an example, I printed out this pattern for this beautiful swancho, a combo between a poncho and a sweater, swancho, which is free, by the way. I will link the pattern in the description below. So as you see, this pattern is called the Butterfly Swancho, and it's designed by Katerina Crochet, which is one of our wonderful freelance designers here at Hobbii. She actually makes lots of gorgeous crochet clothing, also at a beginner's level, and they're all free. So you should definitely check her out. I will link her patterns in the description below. Before we move on, I want you to keep in mind that patterns can be very different, and the information I'm going to give you in this video is very general. But if you find a pattern with different information and you're confused about it, you can always just write a comment below and we'll happily answer. So underneath here, we have all the pattern information. You can see that this pattern is available in sizes small to XXL. It's a pattern for beginners. You will need a 4.5mm hook, or a size 7 in US size. You'll also need a tapestry needle and stitch markers. And we're going to be using the Hobbii Tivoli yarn in color purple, which has color code 37. Over here, you can see how much yarn you need. So for example, if you want to make a swancho in size small, you're going to need a total of 320 grams or 1,120 meters of yarn, which equals to about 7 skeins of Tivoli yarn. And you can see here a link where you can buy the yarn, and the link will just direct you to the pattern where you can easily and quickly find everything you need and just click on buy. One of the biggest hiccups when reading a pattern is the fact that all these abbreviations kind of look like maths. So that made me give up at least 100,000 times. But it's all about patience and it's all about practice. All right, so let's have a look at the abbreviation used in this pattern. CH stands for chain, HDC stands for half double crochet, DC stands for double crochet, VST stands for a V-stitch, SLST stands for slip stitch, and SD is obviously stitch. If you're anything like me and find it difficult to remember these abbreviations, just create some learning props. Whether it's printing on a cheat sheet or writing notes on the printed pattern itself, color coding, whatever goes, just go for it. And then we're given a small but really important detail here. The chain 2 at the beginning of the row counts as the first double crochet. I would explain what that means a little bit later. So let's move on to gauge, 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 whatever you want to call it, gauge. It's pretty boring. But if you're a crochet beginner, gauge is really important, especially if you're crocheting clothes. So what is gauge? Gauge is basically a small swatch of the pattern you're making to make sure that you're not crocheting too tight or too loose. So if your swatch does not match the gauge given in a pattern, the item you're going to be making will end up not being the correct size. So if we look at the gauge here, it says that 5 V-stitches should measure 10 centimeters, and 7.5 rows of V-stitches should also measure 10 centimeters. In order to check the gauge, you need to make a swatch that is bigger than 10 centimeters, because we need to do the measurements in the middle of the swatch. All right, so gauge is super important if you want to substitute the yarn. So if you want to use a different kind of yarn for this project, you will just need to go up or down in hook size, depending on the thickness of the new yarn. But as long as you follow the gauge, you're pretty much good to go. And that's kind of smart, right? But let's move on to the next section, which is about the design and the construction of the swancho. So this swancho basically consists of one big square. You start by making the front panel. Then you leave a hole for the neck. And you just keep on crocheting as you did before, making the back panel. When you're done, you only have to sew the sides together, leaving room for the sleeves. As the last thing, you just gotta crochet the sleeves directly into the swancho and you are done. This section also tells us that the design is oversized, but if you want a tighter look, you can go down a size. But if you think the swancho is too wide, you can make it smaller by decreasing a number of stitches in the foundation chain. Just be aware that you need a multiple of 3 stitches for the pattern to work. Okay, let me give you an example of what this means. The foundation chain is the beginning of our pattern, and it's what all the rest of the stitches are worked into. So if we want to make a project wider, and we have multiples of 3, then we would add on a foundation chain in 3s until we have the width of the project that we want. The same goes if we want to make the project smaller. Next, we have the final measurements. And this pattern is available in five sizes, sorry, not 10. And it's written in US terms. So remember that US and UK terminology are different for the same stitches. The final measurements are listed in the diagram here. The first sentence in the measurements is in centimeters, and the second one is in inches. In this pattern, the first number represents the first size, which is, in this case, small. The measurements for the other sizes are written in between brackets. But you might also find that sizes are written differently than what we have in this pattern. For instance, it can be like 20, which stands for the smallest size. 25 between brackets is a size bigger, so medium. 30, it's a L. 35, XL, etc., etc., etc. One thing that I like to do is to mark the size I need with a color, so I don't get lost in all the numbers. So let's move on into the stitches we will use today. So here you'll see that the pattern consists of 2 different stitches. Half double crochet for the sleeves and V-stitches for the rest of the swancho. A V-stitch for this pattern consists of 3 different stitches put into the same stitch. So in the same stitch, you will put 1 double crochet, then chain 1, and another double crochet. So it's important to say that these special stitches are different depending on the designer's preferences. And this V-stitch we're using today might be different in another pattern. This is why it's really important to stick to the stitch descriptions. In this case, you'll also see a stitch chart. And at first sight, this might look a little bit overwhelming, but it's actually not that hard once you boil it down. So the really great thing about crochet symbols is that they are universal. This means that it doesn't matter if you're reading a pattern that is in Chinese or in English or in Russian or Finnish. It's just all going to be the same as long as you know what these symbols mean. I went ahead and I made the key to reading crochet charts. Alrighty, let's take a look at these symbols. An open circle means a chain stitch. When you see a dot, it represents a slip stitch. The X is a single crochet. So for the half double crochet, the symbol is like an uppercase T. Double crochet is represented by an uppercase T with a slash mark. Treble crochet is represented by an uppercase T with 2 slash marks. Now that we have all these details in place, let's grab the pattern. I grabbed it already, but let's grab it. First, we need to make the front panel. So let's start with the foundation chain. Chain the number of stitches that match your desired size. Row 1. It says to chain 2. Remember that CH means chain, like we saw in the abbreviation. And also, we were told that the chain 2 at the beginning of the row counts as the first double crochet. This is actually the chains you see right here in the chart and represents the height of row 1. Then we see a comma. This means that we're going to move on to the next stitch. Now it says to put a V-stitch in the 5th stitch from the hook. If you're having a hard time remembering how to make a V-stitch, just make another cheat note. Now there are a pair of brackets with some steps in between, followed by the sentence, repeat the section to the end of the row. This means that all of the steps in between the brackets needs to be repeated to the end of the row. So we're skipping 2 stitches and putting 1 V-stitch in the next stitch, and just repeating these steps until we reach the end of the row. We're finishing the row with skipping 1 and putting 1 double crochet in the last stitch. Row 2. We have to chain 2 and put 1 V-stitch in the chain 1 space of the previous row of V-stitches. But if you ever get lost, you can always go back and look at the chart. Repeat to the end of the row and repeat row 2 until you have the desired length of the size that you want. And now it's time for you to finish the pattern by yourself. But I have faith in you. I know you can do this. Just take it step by step. Follow the instructions. Read it out loud to your cat, to your dog, to your grandma, to your grandpa, whatever. Just take it really easy. It will come to life. And yeah, if you like this video, remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And I can't remember the rest of the things, but make sure to hit the notification bell because that's important if you want to see what's up in the next episode. Oh, and one more thing. Remember to follow the commas and everything in between the brackets because that's pretty important. Bye, guys.